In the high Himalayan mountains is the verdant valley of Kashmir. Amidst its great natural beauty, the thoughts of man have constantly turned to the wonder of creation. Since early times, Kashmir has been a renowned center of Hindu and Buddhist philosophy. It is here that the Indian philosophy of aesthetics was expounded in detail by the philosopher Abhinavagupta in the 10th century. It is in Kashmir that Shaivism developed to great heights. The manifestation of Shiva in the beauty of the world around us was worshipped as Shakti. Unlike earlier austere forms of Buddhism, the Mahayana and Vajrayana schools flourished here. There is a very special quality of joyousness which pervades the art of this land, which is blessed by the bounty of nature. In the 1st century, the Kushana Emperor Kanishka held the 4th Great Buddhist Council in Kashmir. It was here that Sanskrit became the language of Buddhist scriptures instead of Pali, which was used before. This was also the first time that Mahayana Buddhism received major royal patronage. Earlier, Buddhism was mainly an ethical message, which called upon each person to seek his own salvation through self-discipline. The new form of Buddhism brought the concept of bodhisattvas. These were beings who had postponed their own salvation to help others in the world on the path towards enlightenment. Followers could turn to them and pray for help. This form of Buddhism proved very popular and spread northwards and eastwards from Kashmir to Central Asia, China, and Tibet. The site of Harvan, on a hill near Srinagar, is where the 4th Buddhist Council is believed to have been held. Tiles found here of a little later period, about the 4th century, display a remarkable meeting of cultures. We see here the art of the Gupta period in the plains of North India, interacting with influences from Central Asia. Geese have been a common motif in Indian art since the Mauryan period. Figures made in balconies above appeared in the art of the Western Indian caves in the 1st century BC and were well established in Kushana art soon thereafter. The facial features seen in the figures, their dress and other motifs remind us of the Parthians, Sasanians, and Scythians, whose presence was constantly felt in Kashmir. In the naturalistic expressions and physiognomy, we see the influence of the art of Gandhara. A fine 5th century Shiva is from Fatehgarh near Baramulla. It shows this blend of influences from the northwest and from Gupta art. A colossal head of Shiva from Pandarethan is of the 7th century. The 8th century ushered in a glorious period in Kashmir. According to the 12th century historian Kalhana, King Lalitaditya expanded the kingdom and conquered most of North India. These military adventures are more likely to have been major raids rather than conquests. However, Lalitaditya would have carried back with him inestimable treasures of precious stones and gold. The prosperity of his reign is seen in the exuberant monuments and art of this period. A great temple dedicated to the sun god, Marthand, was made by Lalitaditya at a commanding location above Anantnag. Except for the colossal 13th century Sun Temple at Konarak in Orissa, this is the largest temple to the sun ever made in India. It is also the largest Brahmanical temple in Kashmir. The temples of Kashmir have a remarkable architectural style of their own, quite unlike the Nagara and Dravida styles of North and South India. Late Hellenistic and Central Asian influences are seen in the triangular pediments enclosing a trefoil arch. 84 niches made around the temple, each contained an image of Surya or Vishnu. As in other Indian temples, these are various manifestations of the main image which was in the sanctum. Lalitaditya also made a large Vishnu temple and a Buddhist chaitya at Parihaspura. This would have been one of the greatest religious centers in the world in the 8th century. Though in ruins today, the scale of the monuments speaks of their former glory. These would have been models for Buddhist structures from Central Asia to Japan. The stupa here was most likely the one depicted in a 12th century painting at Alchi in Ladakh. The historian Kalhana also writes about colossal gold, silver and copper images of Vishnu and the Buddha, which were installed in these temples. This would have continued the tradition of Brihad or great Buddhas, earlier seen at Kanheri in western India. Brihad Buddhas were also seen in Ladakh, Bamiyan, China and Japan. An 8th century crowned Buddha found at Parihaspura displays a form which was popular at that time. The crown is tied with ribbons which flutter on either side in a style common in Central Asian art. A small but well-preserved example of Kashmiri architecture is the temple at Pandarethan on the outskirts of Srinagar. A figure of Lakulisha above the doorway indicates that it is a Shiva temple. A figure of Indrani, the wife of Lord Indra, displays the blend of artistic forms in Kashmir. In the 9th century, Avanti Varman, the founder of the Utpala dynasty, built 2 magnificent temples at Avantipura. Dedicated to Vishnu, the Avanti Swami temple here was modelled on the Marthand temple, though this is much smaller. Though the temple is in a ruined state, a few panels survive to the side of the stairs to the shrine, which show the exuberance of the sculptural style. The figures fill all the available space, giving a crowded appearance to the composition. The most popular form of Vishnu in Kashmir was the 4-headed Chaturmurti. To the sides of the central human face we see the faces of his incarnations as a boar and a lion. The facial type and the modelling of the torso are typical of the style of Kashmiri art. A number of terracotta heads have been found at stupa sites in Akhnur and Ushkur. These would be of the 5th or 6th century. While the heads are of a fine quality and distinctive type, the medium does not seem to have been very popular in Kashmir, where the more permanent material of stone was preferred. The historian Kalhana mentions very large metal images, which were in worship in the 8th century at Parihaspura. These have not survived, but numerous smaller works speak of a vast and active production of excellent figures in metal. The Kashmiri artist preferred an alloy of zinc and copper, which has a beautiful soft glow and a yellow color. The images show the blend of artistic influences from the plains of India and from Gandhara, as seen in the stone sculptures. Whereas the surviving images in stone are mainly Hindu deities, those in metal are chiefly Buddhist. One of the most magnificent works in metal from Kashmir is a nimbus, almost 6 feet high, from Devasar. It is of the 10th century and is a great achievement in the art of metal casting. Forms of Vishnu and his avatars are made in the roundels. An elaborate brass image of the 9th century is a Buddha Verochana. He sits on a lotus pedestal and has stupas on either side. This conventional treatment of rock formations was seen in the murals of Ajanta and is common in Kashmiri art. Verochana is the universal form of the Buddha, in whom is embodied the essence of all Buddhas. Lotus pedestals and the deities of Vajrayana Buddhism are first seen in Buddhist art in the caves of Western India from Kanheri in the 6th century onwards. It is in Kashmir that we see a great flowering of the Vajrayana philosophy and its art. The formidable mountains that ring the valley did not prevent Kashmiri monks from traveling constantly to Tibet, Central Asia, and China. Between the 4th and 10th centuries, they conveyed the teachings of Buddhism far and wide. Kumara Jiva, the son of Kumara from Kashmir, is one of the great Buddhist scholars in Chinese history. Bronzes and manuscripts with paintings were carried by these teachers, which spread the aesthetics of Kashmiri art in distant lands. In the meantime, in the 8th century, in the Himalayan foothills, a high ridge of sandstone was carved into a magnificent temple complex. This was the period when hill faces were carved both inside and out to create temples far south at Kalugumalai and in western India at Ellora. According to art historian Dr. Michael Meister, the great temple here at Masroor provides the antecedent and conceptual model for the vast temple mountains of Cambodia, which were soon to be built. The temple seeks to express the cosmic form of the divine. The sculptures are similar to those found of this period in the wooden temples of the nearby Chamba region. Chamba lies immediately south of the present state of Jammu and Kashmir. The early temples here are in the secluded valley of the river Ravi, naturally protected by high mountains. No ancient trade route, nor even a modern highway, passes through this valley, and it has enjoyed continued periods of peace and stability. Many temples here are over 1,000 years old, with brass images, which have been worshipped continuously since they were consecrated. Eighth-century temples here at Bharmor and Chhatradi have images with inscriptions which mention King Meruvarman as the donor, and also the name of the sculptor Gugga. The wooden temple of Lakshana Devi at Bharmor is richly carved, and it recalls the art of the Gupta tradition in the northern plains. However, there is a lilting grace and joyousness of the hills which pervades this work. The deodar wood is lovingly carved to convey the softness and ever-changing curves of living forms. The doorway is a masterpiece of wooden carving. It has a 3-storied triangular pediment crowned by a gable in the style of the hill architecture seen in Kashmir. In the hills, it is the Devi whose worship is preferred, often in the form of Mahishasur-mardani. She slays the buffalo demon of ignorance, which confounds and confuses our minds. The image of her as Lakshana Devi is slim and graceful, yet it also shows power. There is a late 8th century image of Vishnu under worship at Bharmor. The image conveys the strength and power of Vishnu in his avatara as Narasimha, part human and part lion. A life-sized brass image of Nandi, the bull that Shiva rides, stands in the courtyard of the temples of Bharmor. The Shakti Devi temple at Chhatradi is another wooden structure of the 8th century. The entrance to the sanctum is a magnificent work of art. On the lintel, flying Gandharvas convey the joy of existence. Numerous deities are finely executed on both sides. Both the majesty of the spirit and its ineffable gentleness are conveyed in these fine carvings. Indeed, these serve so well the purpose of raising us far above the mundane concerns of our everyday life. The image of Shakti Devi in worship is slender, with a slightly flexed, elegant stance. The blouse, scarf and other features are reminiscent of those seen in Kashmir and in other hill art. The town of Chamba has several early stone temples which continue to be under worship. The Lakshmi Narayana temple complex in Chamba is a spectacular group of stone structures. A 10th century Shiva and Parvati are the most exquisite group in worship here. While they have a regal bearing, human tenderness is also expressed. Shiva affectionately places his elbow upon Parvati's shoulder. The temple of Mrikula Devi in Lahore may be of the 11th century. Though the exterior is not impressive, the wooden interior of the temple is richly carved. The earliest carvings here are on the entrance to the shrine, the ceiling panels, and the pillars supporting the ceiling. Carvings of the later period include those on both sides of the window. Two large dwarapalas are also of the later period. There is a great deal of similarity seen here with the art and architecture of the Valley of Kashmir. It is in the verdant valleys of the Himalayas that the art of India finds some of its most joyous expressions. The Indian philosophy of aesthetics sees our response to beauty as akin to Brahmananda, or the final ecstasy of enlightenment itself. Therefore, beauty is sought in all that is around us. This is brought to us in art, so as to help transform us and to fill us with divine joy.